It was a cold November night in Montana when police officer Derek Lawson was making his routine patrol along Highway 93. He had 28 years of experience on the police force and had seen it all in his career. Brutal accidents, high-speed chases, violent confrontations. Nothing surprised him anymore, or at least that's what he thought until that particular night that would change his life forever. It was exactly 11:17 p.m. when the malfunctioning taillights of a grey sedan caught his attention. The vehicle was driving perfectly within the speed limit, without any of the erratic behavior that would normally indicate a drunk or drug-induced driver. It was just a routine traffic stop, the kind Derek pulled over 10 times a week without a second thought. He activated his patrol car's emergency lights and followed the vehicle for approximately half a mile until the driver finally pulled over to the side of the deserted road. Derek activated his body camera, as was mandatory. Protocol for the department. The recording began showing his point of view as he exited the patrol car, his breath visible forming small clouds of vapor in the freezing air. The temperature was below zero that night, and a strange fog was beginning to form over the asphalt. He walked towards the stopped vehicle, illuminating the interior with his tactical flashlight. It was then that he saw the driver for the first time. A woman with red hair sat behind the wheel, wearing a dark grey coat and black leather gloves. She held something against her chest. It appeared to be some kind of document or photograph. Her face was pale, in a way that Derek initially attributed to the intense cold, but there was something in her eyes that made him hesitate for a fraction of a second before knocking on the window. They were piercing, almost luminous in the flashlight. The woman lowered the driver's side window slowly, very slowly. Derek noticed she wasn't shivering, despite the brutal cold and the fact that she was wearing relatively thin clothing for that temperature. When the window was completely down, he could see better what she was holding. It was an old photo of a dog, specifically a German Shepherd, along with what appeared to be a veterinary identification card. "Good evening, ma'am. Do you know why I stopped you?" Derek asked, following standard protocol. His voice on the recording sounds firm, but professional. The woman looked him straight in the eye, without blinking, and replied in a strangely calm, emotionless voice, "My taillights, I presume." There was no nervousness in her voice, no sign of the typical reactions people show when stopped by the police. No anxiety, no attempt to be overly polite, no discomfort, just that unsettling calm. Derek asked for her driver's license and vehicle registration. The woman handed over the documents without hesitation, but when Derek shone the light on the driver's license, his stomach churned. The photo on the license perfectly matched the woman sitting in the vehicle, without a doubt. The name listed was Jennifer Ann Morrison, but there was a glaring problem that made Derek look 2-3 times to confirm what he was seeing. The date of birth indicated that the woman would be 72 years old. The person sitting in the vehicle didn't appear to be more than 35-40 at most. "Ms. Morrison, is this really your driver's license?" Derek asked, his voice betraying a slight confusion. The woman simply nodded, still with that blank, almost robotic expression. Derek decided to verify it over the radio, something he did at every routine stop. He returned to his patrol car and relayed the information to dispatch, requesting a full verification of the name, date of birth, and driver's license number. What happened in the next few minutes was something no police training could have prepared Derek for. The switchboard operator, a woman named Susan Martinez, who had worked in that position for 15 years, returned to the radio with a distinctly confused and hesitant voice. "Officer Lawson, can you repeat the name and date of birth? I'm getting some very strange information here in the system." Derek repeated the information exactly as it was on his driver's license. There was a long pause, during which Derek could hear Susan frantically typing on the central computer. When she finally returned to the radio, her voice was visibly shaken. "Derek, the system is showing that Jennifer Ann Morrison, with that birth date and driver's license number, was registered as deceased in 2004. There is a death certificate filed in the system. Cause of death listed as a motor vehicle accident on Highway 93, near the mile marker where you are now. Derek felt a shiver run down his spine. He glanced at the grey sedan parked ahead, illuminated by the red and blue lights of his patrol car. The woman remained motionless in the driver's seat, still holding that photo of the dog. He took a deep breath and decided to approach the situation professionally, thinking there was probably some error in the system, perhaps a case of identity theft or falsified documents. When Derek approached the vehicle again, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. There was no vapor coming from the woman's breath, despite the temperature being several degrees below zero. When he breathed, dense white clouds formed in the air, but from the woman's mouth and nostrils, nothing. Absolutely nothing. She was sitting there in that brutal cold, without any sign of discomfort and without showing the basic physiological signs of being in a freezing environment. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm going to need you to get out of the vehicle," Derek said, his hand instinctively moving closer to his service weapon, though he didn't know exactly why. The woman looked at him for a long moment, those eyes fixed on him with a disconcerting intensity. Then, without saying a word, she opened the driver's side door and got out. Of the vehicle, what happened when she stood completely upright was perfectly captured by Derek's body camera. The woman was approximately 5 feet 7 inches tall, slender, and moved with an unnatural fluidity, as if her movements were calculated by some computer program trying to imitate human behavior but failing to replicate it perfectly. There was no natural swing in her arms as she walked, none of the small unconscious imperfections that characterize human movement. Derek asked her to stand near the back of the vehicle while he checked the license plate. The patrol car's camera, which had been recording continuously since the beginning of the stop, captured something Derek only noticed hours later when reviewing the recording. When the woman passed in front of the patrol car's lights, her shadow was projected onto the asphalt in a completely normal way. But for a fraction of a second, perhaps lasting no more than 3 or 4 frames of the recording, the shadow seemed to distort, forming something that didn't quite match the human silhouette. It was subtle, so subtle that it could easily be attributed to a defect in the recording or a strange reflection from the lights. Derek checked the vehicle's license plate and discovered it was registered to Jennifer Ann Morrison, with an address in a small town called Whitefish, about 60 miles to the north. The vehicle registration was active and valid, with no irregularities. But when he looked at the registration's issue date, his blood ran cold. The vehicle had originally been registered in 1998, and the registration had been regularly renewed every 2 years since then, including a renewal that had occurred just 3 months prior. How can a vehicle have its registration renewed by someone who has been dead for 20 years? Derek thought, trying to make sense of this completely surreal situation. He decided to ask the woman a few more questions, trying to find some rational explanation for all this. Confusion. "Ma'am, the system is showing some conflicting information. Can you tell me where you were coming from and where you're going?" Derek asked, keeping a safe distance but trying not to appear threatening. The woman looked at him with that same blank expression and replied, "I'm going home. I always go home this time of year." The answer was strange, ambiguous, and provided no real information. Derek tried a different approach. "Why are you holding that picture of the dog?" For the first time, something seemed to shift in the woman's expression. Not exactly an emotion, but a kind of disturbance in the mask of calm she was maintaining. She looked at the photo in her hands, as if she had forgotten she was holding it. "This is Max. He was with me in the car when it happened. He didn't survive either." The words sent another shiver down Derek's spine. When did it happen? Was she referring to some kind of accident? Derek decided to press a little harder. "When what happened, Mum?" The woman looked up from the photo and stared at him again, and this time Derek could swear there was something different in that look. A depth, an ancient sadness that seemed to have physical weight. "The accident, on the curve just ahead. It was a long time ago, but I can still feel the impact. The sound of the metal deforming, the glass shattering, Max barking, trying to wake me up, but I was already leaving. I was already leaving this place. His voice, which until then had been monotonous and emotionless, now carried a melancholic tone that made the hairs on Derek's arm stand on end. Derek tried to maintain his professional composure, but every instinct in his body was screaming that something was profoundly wrong with the situation. He decided to do what any police officer would do in a confusing situation: call a superior for guidance. He returned to his patrol car and contacted his sergeant, Robert Chen, explaining the situation as objectively as possible. Sergeant Chen initially reacted with skepticism, presuming Derek had encountered someone using a stolen identity or false documents. He instructed Derek to detain the woman for further investigation and said he would send a backup unit to assist with the situation. Derek agreed and returned to where the woman was standing, still holding that photo of the dog, motionless as a statue. "Ms. Morrison, I'm going to need you to place your hands on the back of the vehicle," Derek said, preparing to conduct a security search. The woman obeyed without resistance, placing her hands flat on the trunk of the grey sedan. That's when Derek noticed something that made his heart race. Her hands, pressed against the cold metal of the vehicle, left no condensation marks. When someone places their hands on a metal surface on a cold night, the warmth of their hands creates a small pattern of moisture or ice. But this woman's hands left absolutely nothing. Derek did a cursory search for weapons or dangerous objects, finding only the car keys, the wallet she had already shown him, and that picture of the dog she refused to let go of. No cell phone, no other form of identification, nothing a normal person would carry in 2024. It was as if she were trapped somewhere in the past. The backup unit arrived approximately 15 minutes later. It was Officer Jessica Ramirez, a 12-year veteran whom Derek knew well and respected. As Jessica exited her patrol car and approached, Derek could see the confused expression on her face as she observed the red-haired woman standing beside the sedan. "Derek, Sergeant Chen gave me a summary, but I need you to explain exactly what's going on here," Jessica said, her hand resting casually on her utility belt. Derek explained the whole situation again, showing her driver's license, explaining about the death certificate being registered in the system, and describing the woman's strange behavior. Jessica decided to try her own approach. She approached the woman and began asking basic questions in a more friendly tone, trying to establish some kind of connection. "Hello, my name is Jessica. I know this situation must be confusing for you too. Can you tell me a little about yourself? Where do you live? Do you have family we can contact?" The woman looked at Jessica with that same blank expression and said something that made both officers exchange worried glances. "I don't have any family anymore. They stayed behind when I left. My parents were devastated. My father found Max first. He had been ejected from the vehicle. My mother was the one who identified my body at the hospital. They moved afterward. They couldn't live in the same house anymore. I don't know where they are now. They've probably left too." Jessica tried a different approach. "If you died in an accident, how are you here now? Can you explain that to me?" The woman seemed to consider the question for a long moment before answering. "I don't know for sure. I just know that on certain days, especially close to the date it happened, I find myself driving again. Always the same road, always the same time, trying to get home, but never arriving. It's like a loop I can't break." Derek and Jessica were completely baffled. None of their training had prepared them to handle a situation like that. Jessica decided to check something. She picked up the photo of the dog that the woman was still holding and examined it carefully. On the back of the photo was a handwritten date, Max, 1998. There was also a stamp from a local veterinary clinic that Jessica recognized, a clinic that had closed at least 15 years ago. Meanwhile, Derek was trying to find more information through his patrol car's onboard computer. He searched for fatal accidents on Highway 93 in 2004 and found something that confirmed what the dispatcher had said. On November 23, 2004, A 28-year-old woman named Jennifer Ann Morrison had lost control of her vehicle on a curve during a snowstorm, crashing into a tree. She was pronounced dead at the scene. A German Shepherd dog was also in the vehicle and did not survive the impact. But there was more information in the accident report. Several witnesses who passed by the site in the weeks following the accident reported seeing a grey vehicle parked near the accident site late at night, always around 11 o'clock. When the authorities investigated, they never found any vehicle. The sightings continued sporadically for years, always at the same time of year, always in the month of November. Derek showed the report to Jessica, and they both looked at the woman standing next to the sedan. It was impossible to deny the resemblance between the photo of the accident victim in the 2004 police report and the person standing before them. But how could it be the same person? The one standing before them didn't seem to have aged a single day since that photo from 20 years ago. Jessica had an idea. She asked the woman to extend her hand. When she did, Jessica carefully tried to check her temperature by pressing 2 fingers against the woman's wrist, as if checking for a pulse. What she felt, or rather, what she didn't feel, confirmed her worst fears. The woman's skin was completely cold, not just cold as if it were a freezing night, but cold as if there were no blood circulation, and there was no pulse. None. Jessica tried different spots, the neck, the other wrist. Nothing. Derek, she has no pulse, Jessica whispered, stepping away from the woman. The woman heard and simply smiled, a sad and resigned smile. Of course I don't. How could I? This happened 20 years ago. Do you think I don't know I shouldn't be here? Do you think I chose to be trapped like this? Her voice for the first time carried real emotion, frustration, sadness, despair. At that moment, something extraordinary happened. The patrol car's camera, which was recording the entire scene, captured something that would make that recording one of the most debated pieces of evidence in paranormal and police circles in the following years. The woman's image began to tremble, as if it were a TV transmission with interference. For approximately 5 seconds, her form became semi-transparent, and through it, it was possible to vaguely see the interior of the vehicle behind her. Then, as quickly as it began, the distortion ceased, and she returned to appearing completely solid and present. Both Derek and Jessica witnessed the phenomenon unfold in real time. They instinctively recoiled, their hands reaching for their weapons, but unsure of what to do. "What's happening?" Derek asked, unsure if he was directing the question at the woman, at Jessica, or at the universe in general. The woman looked at her own hands, observing them as if surprised they were still there. "It's almost time," she said calmly. "It always happens like this. I get weaker as the night goes on. When the clock strikes the exact time it happened, I disappear again. And then, the next year, at the same time, I find myself driving this road once more. It's been like this for 20 years. You are the first ones who have actually stopped and seen me clearly." Jessica, trying to maintain some semblance of professional protocol in a situation that had gone beyond anything that could be called normal, asked the obvious question, "Why do you keep coming back? What's making you get stuck like this?" The woman looked at the photo of Max in her, hands caressing the image with her thumb. "I was driving home that night. I'd just taken Max to the vet because he was sick. The vet said he would need expensive surgery, and I didn't have the money at that moment. I told Max that everything would be okay, that we would find a way. I was driving back home, thinking about how to solve this when the storm worsened. I didn't see the curve in time. In the last fraction of a second before the impact, my last thought was that I had failed him, that Max was going to die because I hadn't been able to save him, and then everything went dark." Derek felt a lump in his throat. Even as a hardened police officer with nearly 3 decades of experience, there was something about the sheer sadness of that story that deeply affected him. "But you didn't fail him," Derek said, surprising himself by having this conversation. "You were doing everything you could. The accident wasn't your fault." The woman looked at him, and for the first time her eyes seemed to show a genuine expression of gratitude. "Thank you for saying that, but no matter how hard I try to convince myself of it, I still find myself trapped in this loop, driving down this road, holding this photo, reliving that moment over and over again." Jessica checked her watch. It was 11:43. According to the accident report Derek had found, Jennifer Morrison had been pronounced dead at 11:52. There were only 9 minutes left. "What happens when the time comes?" Jessica asked. The woman shrugged. "I disappear. I simply cease to be here. The car, me, everything goes away. And then, the next year it all starts again. I have no memory of the time between events. It's as if those specific moments on the road are all that remains of me." Derek had an idea. He ran back to his patrol car and grabbed a small Bible he kept in the glove compartment. He wasn't particularly religious, but his mother had given him that Bible when he joined the police academy, and he kept it for sentimental reasons. He went back to where the woman was standing and offered her the book. "I don't know if this will help, but maybe if you hold something that can offer some kind of peace or closure," Derek said, feeling a little foolish for suggesting it, but not knowing what else to do. The woman stared at the Bible for a long moment, then reached out to pick it up. The moment her fingers touched the leather cover, something extraordinary happened. A soft light, almost imperceptible at first, began to emanate from the point where her hand touched the book. It wasn't a bright or dramatic light like those shown in films, but a subtle, warm luminescence that gradually spread across her arms, then the rest of her body. The cameras captured this phenomenon perfectly, and the recording would be analyzed frame by experts in the years that followed. The woman closed her eyes, and for the first time since the beginning of that surreal traffic stop, her expression shifted to something that could only be described as peace. "I feel something different," she murmured. "Something is changing." Derek and Jessica watched in respectful silence, unsure what else to do but witness what was happening. It was exactly 11:50 when the transformation began. The woman's form began to become transparent again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the unstable and disturbing distortion that had happened before. It was a gradual and smooth dissolution, as if she were becoming part of the night itself. The light emanating from her grew brighter for a moment, and then, in the recording, something could be clearly seen that made even the most skeptical researchers pause. For a brief moment, the silhouette of a dog appeared beside her. It wasn't solid, more like an impression of reality, but it was unmistakably the shape of a German shepherd. The woman, still with her eyes closed and now almost completely transparent, smiled. "Max," she whispered, "you were waiting for me the whole time." At 11:52, exactly the moment the 2004 accident report recorded the time of her death, Jennifer Ann Morrison was completely gone. She didn't disappear dramatically with a flash of light or sound. She simply ceased to be there. The grey sedan was gone along with her. Derek's Bible fell to the ground, landing open on a specific page. When Derek picked it up, he noticed it was open to a verse from Ecclesiastes. "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens." Next to the Bible on the floor was Max's photo. Derek picked it up carefully. It was an old, faded photo, exactly as it had appeared when the woman held it. On the back, besides the date and the veterinary clinic stamp, there was now something new, a word written in delicate handwriting that definitely hadn't been there before. "Thank you." Derek and Jessica stood on the shoulder of Highway 93 for several minutes, in complete silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Eventually, Jessica broke the silence. "No one will believe us," she said, her voice still trembling slightly. Derek nodded but pointed to the cameras. "We have everything recorded, every second." In the days and weeks that followed, the recordings from that night were extensively analyzed. The Montana Police Department initially wanted to keep the incident secret, fearing ridicule or accusations of fabricating evidence. But the recordings were very clear, very detailed, and had been captured on multiple cameras simultaneously. Visual effects experts were consulted and all agreed that if it was a fake, it would be so sophisticated that it would be beyond the capabilities of any local police department to create. Derek decided to conduct his own private investigation into Jennifer Morrison. He visited the veterinary clinic whose stamp was on the photo, which had closed but whose owner still lived in the area. The veterinarian, an 80-year-old man named Dr. Harold Pemberton, clearly remembered Jennifer and Max. She was such a kind young woman, he said, completely devastated because she couldn't pay for Max's surgery immediately. I told her we could work out a payment plan, but she was so stressed by the situation that she drove off in that terrible storm. I heard about the accident the next day. It was a tragedy. Derek also managed to locate Jennifer's parents. They had moved to Oregon years ago, but agreed to speak with him by phone. Jennifer's mother, Patricia Morrison, now 75, wept as Derek described their encounter. For all these years, I've had dreams about Jenny driving down that road, searching for something. I'd wake up in the middle of the night feeling like she was still there somehow, trapped. I always wondered if it was just my grief or if there was something more. When Derek mentioned Max, Patricia sobbed. That dog was everything to her. The fact that he was with her in the accident destroyed her even more than her own death would have. She would have given anything to save him. The story eventually leaked to the media, as these things always do. The recordings were made publicly available following a Freedom of Information request and became a viral sensation on the internet. Skeptics pointed to possible technical explanations, simultaneous malfunctions in multiple cameras, some kind of collective hallucination caused by a gas or carbon monoxide leak, or even an elaborate artistic performance. But none of these explanations could satisfactorily account for all aspects of the incident. Paranormal experts argued that it was one of the best documented cases of a phenomenon they call traumatic residue. The theory that intense traumatic events can somehow leave an imprint on reality that repeats itself under certain conditions. The fact that it apparently resolved itself, that Jennifer finally found peace and closure, added another layer of fascination to the case. Derek never fully recovered from that night. He retired from the police force 6 months later, citing the need to spend more time with his family. But everyone who knew him knew that the incident had fundamentally changed him. He frequently gave lectures about his experience, always emphasizing that he wasn't trying to convince anyone of anything, only recounting what he and Jessica had witnessed and what the cameras had recorded. Jessica continued working as a police officer, but she also carried the weight of that. At night, she described in interviews how that experience had changed her perspective on reality, on what is possible, and on the nature of consciousness and death. Before that night, I had a very materialistic view of the world, she said in an interview. Afterward, I can no longer pretend that I fully understand how reality works. The photo of Max that was left behind became a sort of relic. Derek kept it in a frame in his house, and it became a constant reminder of that extraordinary night. Paranormal investigators offered significant sums of money to examine the photo, particularly interested in the word "thank you" that had mysteriously appeared. But Derek always refused, feeling it would be a desecration in some way. A year after the incident, on November 23rd, Derek and Jessica returned to the site of the traffic stop, accompanied by a small group of investigators and enthusiasts. They waited from nightfall until after midnight, but there were no sightings. The grey sedan didn't appear. Jennifer Morrison didn't appear. Whatever had been keeping her trapped in that loop had apparently been resolved that night when Derek offered her his Bible and she finally found some kind of peace. Theories about what really happened that night continue to proliferate. Some believe it was genuinely a paranormal phenomenon, a trapped soul that finally found liberation. Others suggest more exotic explanations involving quantum physics, parallel realities, or temporal glitches. Skeptics maintain that there must be a rational explanation, even if we haven't found it yet. What is undeniable are the recordings. Hours of footage from multiple angles, showing something that defies easy explanation. A woman who shouldn't exist, driving a car that should have been destroyed 20 years earlier, trapped in a moment of trauma and guilt until two police officers at a routine stop offered her something no one had offered in 2 decades: compassion, understanding, and perhaps, just perhaps, a way to move on. Derek keeps the recordings and the photo of Max as reminders that there is much about the universe that we don't understand, and that perhaps we don't need to understand it completely. Sometimes it's enough to acknowledge that there are mysteries, that there are things beyond our complete comprehension, and that kindness and compassion can have effects that transcend normal logic. To this day, no one has reported another sighting of Jennifer Morrison or her grey sedan on Highway 93. The loop has apparently been broken. Wherever Jennifer is now, hopefully she is at peace, reunited. She is reunited with her beloved Max, finally free from the weight of guilt and trauma that kept her imprisoned for so long. And two people who were once skeptical and practical police officers carry with them the memory of a night that forever changed how they see the world and their place in it.